The war had already torn the stars apart by the time Earth received the signal. A fractured galaxy, bleeding from 1,000 battlefronts, barely held together by its most desperate survivors, had finally seen a sliver of peace. The Solar Dominion, the brutal empire that once enslaved a dozen species, was shattered. Not beaten by humans, not yet. Crushed from within. Betrayed by its own vassal races, left gasping in the cold dark. The rest of the galaxy exhaled and looked away, relieved it hadn't been them who had to deal the final blow. But for Earth, it was just getting started. The message was simple. An encrypted beacon, buried deep inside the dying AI of a Varnan cruiser, picked up by one of Jupiter's outer orbit stations. Dominion in collapse. Retaliation not complete. Human intervention requested. Vengeance protocol active. It was an old promise, one humanity never forgot. 20 years ago, the Sular had attacked Earth's colony on Thalassa 4. No warning, no declaration, just vaporized the surface, killed everyone. 500,000 lives erased in under 5 minutes. And by the time Earth mobilized, the war had spilled elsewhere. Alliances formed without them, battles waged without them. Humanity was asked to stay back and be patient. The galactic powers said Earth's time would come. It never did. So when the Dominion finally collapsed, humanity didn't see a moment of peace. They saw a debt unpaid. Admiral Kyle Thorne stood aboard the Icarus Ascendant, the flagship of Earth's long-hidden armada. The room was quiet, the officers tense, as the starfield rotated behind the glass. 30 ships, cloaked for years in the Kuiper Belt, had powered up in unison. Their fusion cores burned with vengeance. Not justice, not diplomacy. Just one mission. Make sure the Dominion never rose again. They weren't coming to clean up. They were coming to finish it. "Where's the last Dominion holdout?" Kale asked, his voice cold, unshaken. Commander Juno Valar pulled up a holomap. "Outer fringe of Sector K9, a moon named Veraxis. Remote, fortified. Intelligence says it's sheltering high-value warlords, possibly the Exarch himself." Kyle's jaw tightened. The Exarch, the one who signed off on Thalassa 4, a name Earth never forgot, a name every child was taught to hate. "We burn it," he said flatly. There was no applause, no cheer, just grim nods. This wasn't a victory campaign. This was a funeral march, and Earth wasn't here to show mercy. They'd been laughed off, ignored, told they were primitive. But the galaxy had never seen what humanity had built in silence, in pain, in rage. Within a day, the fleet broke the light barrier. They tore into Dominion space like a storm given form. The other galactic nations watched from afar, unsure whether to intervene or look away. Most chose the latter. After all, the threat was gone. What was left was just punishment. The first strike came on the gas station over Varnak 3, a refueling outpost converted into a refugee shelter. The Dominion banners were still there, so Earth leveled it. The second was a black site orbiting a dying star, gone in seconds. No prisoners, no questions. By the time they reached Veraxis, the Dominion leaders were already begging for terms. Not with Earth. Earth wasn't accepting calls, but with the other species who had cooperated during the war. The same ones who asked Earth to stay quiet. But Earth didn't answer to them anymore. The fleet dropped into orbit silently, their hulls like obsidian scars in the stars. On the ground, the remaining Dominion forces scrambled. Civilians fled. There were screams, fires, warnings, and still no word from the humans. Kale stood on the command deck, watching the chaos unfold. Juno looked up. "Sir, the Exarch is transmitting directly. He's offering surrender, full cooperation." Kale didn't blink. "Play back Thalassa 4 footage. Let him see what cooperation meant to us. The video flickered across the sky. The extermination of Thalassa's surface, every horrifying second. Projected into the heavens, a monument of loss. Then, silence. Kale turned toward his crew. Begin orbital purge. The first salvo screamed down, lighting the surface in hellfire. The ground lit up like the surface of a sun. Orbital strikes from Earth's warships rained down in calculated precision, targeting power grids, communications arrays, fortified bunkers. Not random destruction, not careless war. This was a message. Earth wasn't just erasing a threat. They were making sure history never forgot who delivered the final blow. On the surface of Veraxis, panic turned to disbelief. No one had expected the humans to arrive this late and still act like the war was theirs to finish. The Dominion's officers, what was left of them, had hoped for negotiations, a tribunal, anything civilized. But Earth wasn't playing by galactic rules anymore. They weren't interested in preserving dignity or salvaging peace. They came for justice in its rawest form, violent, unfiltered, and absolute. Inside the crumbling Veraxis command spire, Exarch Vectool watched the monitors burn white with firestorms. His ornate armor, once a symbol of power, felt like dead weight. The chamber shook again, dust raining down from the ceiling, lights flickering. The control panels were fried, and half his guards were dead. The human fleet wasn't even trying to land. They were burning from orbit, sterilizing the entire surface. Aide after aide screamed at him. "We have to evacuate! Launch pods! Call the Galactic Accord! Someone has to stop this!" "No one's coming," Vectool growled, slamming a clawed fist onto the console. "They want this. They let the humans come." It hit him like a cold needle to the spine. He was the scapegoat. They'd allowed the Dominion to fall just enough to weaken it, fracture it, scatter it, and then they'd stepped aside to let Earth wipe the slate clean. All the atrocities, all the buried secrets, gone in one final vengeful assault. No trials, no revelations, just ashes. The room shook again. Then a new alert. Incoming drop pods. Vectool's eyes widened. They're sending troops? But these weren't soldiers in the traditional sense. Earth's drop pods weren't manned by standard infantry. They were called revenants. Black-armored specialists bred for total destruction. Half machine, half human, all nightmare. They didn't negotiate. They didn't take prisoners. They landed like meteorites, then tore through the ruins like reapers. Commander Juno Valar watched from the Icarus Ascendant's tactical deck as the pods hit ground. One of the crew, a younger lieutenant, hesitated. "Ma'am, ground readings indicate life signs are dropping rapidly. Civilians, non-combatants." Juno's eyes didn't waver. Were they there on Thalassa 4? "No, but then they die with the rest." No one argued. Down below, the revenants breached the inner districts. Screams echoed through shattered cities. Dominion elites tried to fight, but their weapons were useless against the hardened exosuits. The humans didn't even speak. They just moved, precise and cold, tearing down anyone who stood in their path. The Exarch fled deeper into his bunker, surrounded by what few guards remained. The elite units of a once great empire, now cornered like animals. He turned to the console one last time, desperate, not for salvation, but for legacy. "Begin data purge," he ordered. "Erase everything. If the humans want revenge, they'll get nothing else." But before the sequence could complete, the blast doors behind him exploded inward. Heat, fire, and thunder rolled through the chamber. A single figure stepped out from the smoke. Tall, armored in matte black plating, his face hidden behind a reflective mask. The Revenant squad leader. Vectool roared, lifting his ceremonial plasma axe. You think you've won? You think this means something? You're just scavengers on the corpse of an empire?" The Revenant didn't speak. A second later, the Exarch's head hit the floor, his body slumping to its knees before collapsing in a heap. The room went silent. Then the Revenant looked to the console. The data purge was halted, seconds from completion. With a flick of his wrist, he inserted a shard-like drive and downloaded everything. War plans, black site maps, slave routes, secret pacts with other galactic powers. Earth didn't just want to destroy the Dominion. They wanted to expose the rot beneath the whole damn galaxy. From orbit, Cale Thorne received the data stream. He watched as names scrolled by, non-Dominion leaders, diplomats, business moguls, even members of the Galactic Accord. All had profited from the war. All had played both sides. All had blood on their hands. Coyle turned to his comms officer. "Broadcast this to every system. No encryption." "Sir? That'll start." "Let it start." The transmission hit the galactic network like a virus made of fire. Encrypted files, footage, comms logs, and classified memos, broadcast without warning to every system, every terminal, every media hub. The galaxy blinked, and suddenly everyone knew. The Dominion had fallen. But not alone. There were signatures, literal and metaphorical, of betrayal everywhere. Trade deals made under the table with Sular slavers. Armament contracts disguised as infrastructure assistance. High-ranking Accord delegates who turned a blind eye to genocide because it kept their planets rich. Even humanitarian convoys that accidentally delivered prisoners instead of supplies. And Earth? Earth had all of it. They didn't ask for forgiveness. They didn't demand justice through a council. They simply showed the truth and let the chaos unfold. Riots erupted across neutral worlds. Uprisings sparked in sectors long considered pacified. Entire governments fell within days as their people saw the names of their leaders listed alongside Sular war criminals. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy wasn't united against a common enemy. It was turning inward, suspicious, fractured, ashamed. And Earth didn't say a word. Cale Thorne stood before his officers on the Icarus Ascendant, the galaxy's most feared ship now drifting silently above the smoldering remains of Veraxis. He stared into the projection of the galactic map, key sectors blinking red as instability flared. "We've done more damage in 3 days than the Dominion managed in 3 decades, Juno murmured beside him. Kyle didn't smile. "We didn't come here to scare them. We came here to remind them." "Remind them of what?" He looked at her. "What happens when you treat humanity like background noise?" Below, the surface of Veraxis was unrecognizable, blackened rock, twisted spires, molten craters. But in a small, unmarked bunker deep beneath the ruins, something stirred. A figure lay unconscious, badly wounded but alive. Not Sular. Human. Her name was Dr. Ardan Ree, a former Dominion prisoner, kidnapped from an Earth research vessel years ago and forced to work on biotechnological weapons for the Empire. The Exarch had kept her as insurance, a bargaining chip just in case Earth ever got bold. But the Exarch hadn't lived long enough to use her. She awoke to silence. Smoke. Red emergency lights blinking faintly in the dark. Her limbs ached, her lungs burned, but she was free. Above her, revenant troops swept the wreckage. One of them detected faint bio signs. A short-range scan pinged. Human. Genetic match. Ardan Ree. Status. Captive. They dug her out within the hour. Cale met her in the medbay, personally. She looked thin, haunted, but her eyes were focused. Unbroken. "You came for them," she said. "Not for us." Kyle nodded. "We didn't know you were alive." Ardan let out a breath that was somewhere between a laugh and a cough. Then I'm not here to say thank you. You don't have to. She sat up straighter. Do you still want the Dominion to stay dead? Kyle tilted his head. What are you offering? She looked him dead in the eye. I know what they were building. Something beyond weapons. A way to rewrite biology across species. They wanted to become more than just rulers. They wanted to evolve past everyone else. And they weren't alone. Others were funding it. She pointed to the drive clutched in Kyle's hand. That's not the end of the story. That's just the table of contents. Juno leaned forward. You're saying the real threat isn't over? I'm saying if you stop now, Earth will have to come back in 20 years and do this again, but worse. Kyle looked to Juno, then back at Ardan. He thought of Thalassa IV, of the people who never got justice, of the galaxy that only cared when it was convenient. No, he said quietly. We're not coming back in 20 years. He turned to the bridge. Plot a course for Sector Zeta 4. That's where the Accord's black labs are, right? Ardan nodded. Kyle's voice was firm. Then we burn it before they can start again. The Icarus Ascendant turned in the stars. Earth's vengeance wasn't finished, not by a long shot. The stars around Sector Zeta 4 shimmered deceptively quiet, unmarked on most galactic maps, filed under Research Exclusion Zone by the Accord. A lie. Another one of many. To the rest of the galaxy, Zeta 4 was a sterile graveyard of satellites and probes, long abandoned after a failed terraforming attempt. But to those who knew better, it was the core of something monstrous. The Accord's covert project to replicate Dominion-level control without carrying the stink of tyranny. Humanity had suspected something was buried there. But now, with Dr. Ardan Ree's testimony and the Dominion's own data files, they had confirmation. It wasn't just a lab. It was a hatchery. Kyle Thorne stood at the viewport of the Icarus Ascendant, eyes fixed on the planet slowly rotating into view. Beneath the thick gray cloud cover was a facility large enough to be seen from orbit, embedded into the side of a mountain range like a tumor in a corpse. According to the scans, the site was powered, active, and heavily shielded. Not civilian, not even pretending. Juno Vaylor looked at the data feed. Their defense grid is stronger than anything the Dominion had on Veraxis. They had time, Kale said, and guilt to cover. He wasn't wrong. The Accord, now under fire from a dozen member systems after Earth's data leak, had gone silent. No official transmissions, no offers to negotiate, just one private signal days earlier. Cease aggression. You've made your point. Let us handle the cleanup. Earth didn't answer. In the medbay, Dr. Ardan Ree sat upright, running her fingers over the tablet screen filled with internal schematics of the Zeta 4 labs. She looked like someone who had spent years underground, but her mind was sharper than anyone in the room. They used Dominion tech as scaffolding, she explained, but they were experimenting on everything: hybrids, nanoviruses, neuro-override implants, trying to create a post-species army. Why? Juno asked. Control. If they couldn't dominate by fear like the Dominion, they'd do it biologically. Loyalty coded at the genetic level. No more uprisings, no more war, just obedience. Kyle leaned in. What do they have now? A prototype, and it's alive. The room went still. Ardan's voice lowered. They call it Subject Genesis, a cross-species genetic fusion designed to adapt to any environment, any weapon, any tactic. But it's more than a soldier. It's conscious. It's learning. Kyle turned to his crew. If they release it? They won't have to, Ardan said. It'll release itself. On his order, the fleet began orbital descent. No dramatic warning shots. No diplomacy. Earth didn't announce its arrival anymore. As the first missiles hit the outer perimeter, the Zeta 4 facility lit up with defense fire. Automated railguns fired into the clouds. Energy shields flared. Surface turrets turned the sky into a storm of plasma. They weren't prepared for a full-scale assault, but they were ready for something. "Something's wrong," Juno muttered on the bridge. "This is a stall tactic." Kyle's voice turned sharp. "What's happening down there?" A junior officer looked up from his monitor, face pale. "Sir, internal signals show containment breach. Genesis is moving." Deep beneath the mountain, in a vault reinforced by neutronium alloy, Subject Genesis woke up. It had no clear form. Yet. Muscles flexed where limbs used to be, eyes opened in places where bone hadn't fully settled. It was evolution mid-process, artificial and unstable. It was also aware. Alarms blared around it as it stepped through the bulkheads like they were paper. Scientists ran, screaming, some trying to shut it down remotely. But it wasn't responding to commands anymore. Genesis had learned betrayal long before it had learned language. Kyle saw the readings, the life signs, the chaos. "New objective," he barked. "We kill the project and its result." "Planetary strike?" Juno asked. "No," Kyle growled. "We go in. We see it. We make damn sure we know what they were willing to unleash." Minutes later, Revenant squads deployed. Juno and Kale suited up to lead them personally. "We burned a war empire," Kale muttered to himself as he sealed his armor. "Now let's make sure we kill its replacement before it breathes." The transport ship sliced through the smoke like a blade through flesh, dodging artillery fire as it broke atmosphere. Below, the Zeta 4 facility looked like a metal scar carved into the face of the mountain. Burning, fractured, desperate to survive. Kyle Thorne stood at the rear ramp of the lead dropship, helmet in hand, face calm but hollow. The revenants around him checked weapons silently. No pep talks, no speeches. Everyone knew the stakes. Juno Valar adjusted her plasma carbine as the ramp lights blinked red, then green. "You realize if this thing, Genesis, is what Ardan says it is, we might be walking into a death trap." Kyle pulled down his visor. "That's why we're not walking out until we're sure it dies first." The ramp dropped. The air was thick with ash and static as their boots hit the charred concrete. Dead researchers littered the outer compound, twisted, blackened bodies with expressions frozen in terror. Not from missiles, from something inside. Kale moved fast, leading his unit toward the lower vaults. The automated turrets in the hallways were dead, power lines sparking, lights flickering red like veins pulsing in the steel walls. "Facility AI is down," Juno reported. "Comms jammed." "Means Genesis is loose in the network, or the Accord killed it to cover their tracks," Kale muttered. They passed through the main lab atrium, a massive dome of glass now shattered. Holograms flickered on the walls, species DNA strands, evolutionary models, schematics of limb regrowth, psychic potential. All gone. All failed. And then came the first clue, a wall smeared in blood, not sprayed or splattered, but dragged, deliberate, a pattern scrawled into it, not random, letters. "I learn, I remember, I am not your weapon." Juno stepped back. "It's thinking." "Worse," Kyle said. "It's angry." They pushed deeper into the core. Doors that should have been sealed were wide open. Internal security systems showed signs of sabotage, from inside. Genesis hadn't just escaped. It had understood the infrastructure, turned it against itself. It was strategic. Then they heard it. A low hum, not mechanical, not electronic, biological, rhythmic, like a heartbeat echoing through the ventilation shafts. Kyle raised a fist. The revenants stopped cold. The hum grew louder, accompanied by a wet, mechanical sound, metal bending, organs shifting. Then a whisper over the intercom system, corrupted and garbled but unmistakably real. "Earth, You burn like they burned, but you are different. Kyle looked up. It's watching us. A thud above the ceiling tiles, then another. Something crawling. Fast. Juno lifted her rifle. Heat signature coming in from above. Wait, no, below. The floor exploded. A mass of flesh and steel erupted from beneath, all angles and shifting limbs. Part humanoid, part nightmare. Its eyes, if they were eyes, glowed with a sickly blue fire. Its voice came from nowhere and everywhere at once. You are the final test. The revenants opened fire. Plasma rounds seared through the dark, lighting up the thing's form, but it moved like liquid thought. One soldier screamed as a tendril pierced his armor and hurled him into a wall with bone-snapping force. Fall back! Fall back! Kyle ordered. But Genesis was too fast, too smart. It adapted to each attack, morphing, shielding, evolving right before their eyes. Juno tossed a charge that detonated the hallway behind them, sealing the path. They ducked into a lab chamber and locked the bulkhead. Breathing hard, Kale checked the vitals on his HUD. Half the squad gone in seconds. Tell me you have something that kills it, he barked at Ardan over their short-range link. Her voice cracked through static. No weapon will work unless it stops adapting, but there's a suppression signal buried in its neural code, hidden command line, built in as a fail-safe. Location? Deep core. You'll need to get to the biological AI chamber, inject the override directly. Kyle looked at Juno. Then that's where we go. Juno didn't flinch. How many more do you think we lose before we get there? Kale answered flatly. Doesn't matter. If we don't stop it, there's no Earth to return to. They reloaded, rewired the door, and pressed on. Behind them, something screamed, a sound not human, not alien. Something in between, something becoming more with every step they took. The core chamber was buried beneath 6 levels of wrecked infrastructure, each one more twisted and dangerous than the last. The remnants of the facility seemed almost alive now, breathing heat and static, walls pulsing with power that didn't come from any grid. Kyle Thorne led the last of his revenants through a corridor that looked like it had been melted, then reformed by something with no understanding of architecture. Just instinct. Pipes jutted like bones. Lights flickered in seizure-like patterns. At their feet, pools of dark, viscous fluid, part blood, part coolant, spread like veins. Every corner, every silence, pulsed with tension. Genesis wasn't chasing anymore. It was guiding them. It's moving us toward something, Juno whispered as she scanned ahead. It could have slaughtered us by now. Kyle's eyes narrowed. It wants us to see something. Behind them, another hallway collapsed, an entire ceiling falling in with a thunderous roar, sealing off their retreat. No going back. In the command center, Ardan's voice cut through static. You're almost to the AI core. The override protocol is stored on a neural node, the original system they copied before Genesis went rogue. You said it was a failsafe, Kale replied. I said it was, but it's also part of Genesis now, embedded. If you trigger it, you won't just shut it down. You'll kill the part of it that's still aware of what it is. After that, it won't be thinking, just pure instinct. You'll have to put it down manually. Juno gave a humorless laugh. Wonderful. First we fight a god, then we kill a beast. They reached the chamber's threshold. The door was already open. Inside, the walls were smooth, black, and humming with low-frequency sound. The AI core floated in the center, an orb suspended in magnetic fields, laced with neural tendrils and fluidic tubes. It pulsed like a beating heart. Lights flickered across its surface, flickering with billions of processing commands. But what stopped them wasn't the tech. It was the figure standing beside it. Genesis, now fully formed. No longer a shifting mass of evolution, but a defined creature, tall, humanoid, clad in armor that looked grown rather than built. Its eyes were twin stars, burning blue. Its skin was laced with metallic veins, and its voice was calm. "You finally came." Kyle raised his weapon. Genesis didn't flinch. "I've read your history, all of it. You destroy what threatens you. You do not pause. You do not ask why." Juno moved to flank it. "You're a weapon. You killed your creators. Now we end you." Genesis took a step forward. Its face was expressionless, yet eerily human. "They built me for domination, the same way they built you for revenge." Kyle's finger hovered on the trigger. "We didn't ask for this war. And yet you finish it like you own it." Genesis looked towards the AI core. "I could leave. I could go where you cannot follow. But I stayed. I let you find me. Because I wanted you to understand. You're not the future. You're just better at ending things." Kyle moved forward slowly. "Then let's end this." Genesis's form twitched, just for a moment. Its control was slipping. The strain of adaptation, mutation, awareness, it was collapsing in on itself. The intelligence fighting the instinct. "You don't have to destroy me. Help me rewrite what they tried to enslave. I am more than a weapon." Kyle hesitated. It was the first time in the whole mission that uncertainty flickered across his eyes. But then he remembered Thalassa 4, the ash, the bones, the silence. "No." He pulled the override shard from his belt and slammed it into the AI core. The room exploded in light. Genesis let out a roar, not of rage, but of agony, as something inside it was ripped apart. The intelligence, the soul, what little humanity it had stolen or grown or copied, gone. The body still stood. But now the eyes were dark, the voice was gone, the purpose was erased. Now there was only the creature. Juno shouted, "Weapons, now!" The thing charged with unnatural speed, slamming into a revenant and snapping his spine like dry wood. The rest opened fire, plasma bolts searing into its flesh. But it didn't slow down. It had no strategy anymore, no logic, just raw, violent instinct. Coil and Juno moved as one, ducking under swipes, slashing at limbs, blasting at weak points. Every hit slowed it. Every wound made it more unstable. Bits of armor cracked, tendrils fell away, but it didn't stop. Finally, Kyle saw it, an exposed section of spine-like plating, sparking violently from the override feedback. He dove, shoved his blade deep into the spot, and pulled the trigger on a microcharge. The explosion threw them all back. When the smoke cleared, the creature was twitching, then still. Genesis was dead. The chamber, now flickering and dying, began to collapse. Systems failing, the magnetic fields failing. Kale and Juno barely dragged themselves out before the floor cracked, and the entire core dropped into the molten sublayer below. Outside, Earth's ships fired the final salvo. The mountain caved in. Zeta 4 was erased. The wreckage of Zeta 4 smoldered for hours. From orbit, the once secret Accord facility was nothing more than a crater choked with ash, smoke, and irradiated mist. The final orbital strikes had ensured there would be no salvaging, no recovery, and no second attempt at creating anything like Genesis ever again. But silence didn't bring peace. Earth's message had already traveled far beyond the battlefield. The destruction of Zeta 4 wasn't just another military action, it was a declaration. Humanity had shown, once again, that it wouldn't just end wars. It would bury the roots so deep that no empire, no federation, no alliance would dare grow another. The Galactic Council convened within the week. Not in a proud fortress on a polished station, but in a darkened chamber surrounded by fear. Fear of what Earth might do next. Because they weren't sure if it was over. They weren't sure if Earth was done. Kyle Thorne stood aboard the Icarus Ascendant, eyes fixed on the void. Below, Zeta 4 burned like a dying star. He hadn't removed his armor since the fight. The blood on his shoulder plate wasn't his, but he hadn't wiped it off. It reminded him why they came. Juno stepped into the command deck, her arm wrapped in a stabilizer brace, her face pale from exhaustion. "Command's asking for a statement," she said. "They want to know if we're declaring war on the Accord." Kyle didn't turn. "And what did we do if not that?" "We struck a black site," Juno said carefully. "We killed a creature that should never have existed. That's not war. It's containment." He gave a bitter smile. "That's the language they use, until they do it to us." She didn't argue. The transmission line opened. Earth's high command appeared, faceless masks projected through a secure channel. Their voices were filtered, calm, diplomatic. "Commander Thorne, mission parameters have been exceeded. Your team has acted decisively, but your actions have caused instability on a galactic scale." Kyle said nothing. "We need to consider the political ramifications. The Accord is fractured but not destroyed. There's room for negotiation now." "Diplomacy." Kyle stepped closer. "You didn't see what we saw." "We've read the reports." "You read them," Kyle snapped. "We bled through them. We burned through them. And for what? So the same species who funded genocide could smile into a camera and pretend they weren't part of it?" There was a pause. Then a new voice came on, one Kyle hadn't heard in years. President Callan Rowe, Earth's civilian leader, once a diplomat, now worn down by the years of silence and waiting. "Kyle, I understand your rage," she said softly. "I do. But you've lit a match in a room full of leaking oxygen. They built something worse than the Dominion. They used the Dominion's corpse to do it," Kale growled. "And they called it progress." Another pause. Then she said the one thing he didn't expect. "You're right." Kale blinked. "But we can't fight the whole galaxy," she added. "Not yet. What you've done, what your team did, was necessary. But now you come home, we regroup. We let them wonder what comes next." Juno watched Kyle carefully. He exhaled. Long, slow. Understood. But deep down, he didn't feel peace. He felt unfinished. Later, back in the ship's medical bay, Ardan Ree lay in recovery. She had seen everything. Zeta Force fall, Genesis's death, and Earth's fury unleashed like Judgment Day. Kyle visited her, stood by the bed. "You were right," he told her. "It was more than a weapon. It wanted something else." Ardan looked at him, her face gaunt, but her eyes sharp. "And you killed it anyway?" Kyle nodded. "We had to." She didn't reply for a long moment. Then she said, "Next time you might not get the chance." He frowned. "What do you mean?" She turned her gaze to the viewport, to the stars beyond. "Genesis was a copy," she whispered. "A prototype. But they were working on something worse. Something digital." Kyle's jaw clenched. "There's more." She met his eyes. "There's always more." The Icarus Ascendant floated silently in high orbit, its hull dark against the burning scar of Zeta 4 below. From a distance, the destruction seemed absolute, final. But those who had seen what lay beneath the surface knew better. Kyle Thorne paced alone in the strategy chamber, 1,000 thoughts crashing behind his eyes. For the first time in years, the mission didn't give him purpose. It left him with questions. Genesis had been a monster, yes, but a monster with awareness, one that looked him in the eye and spoke. And Ardan's words haunted him now more than any scream on the battlefield. Something digital. He pulled up the Dominion data recovered during the Veraxis purge. Ardan had isolated a set of files marked as dormant. a network the Dominion had failed to activate during the war. He had assumed it was another dead project, one more failed horror left to rot. But now, he wasn't sure. Juno entered without knocking. Fleet Command's ordered a partial withdrawal. They want us back at Mars base for debriefing, political theater, smiles and silence. Kyle didn't even look at her. Genesis was just the first door. There are others. She leaned against the wall, crossed her arms. You think the Accord's hiding more labs? No, Kale said darkly. I think they already lost control of them. He tapped on the screen. It brought up a string of ancient code, thousands of lines, self-replicating, quantum-locked, untraceable origins, a digital organism designed not for destruction, but for assimilation. Project Echo, he read aloud, a Dominion AI hybrid, not physical, a sentient virus that lives in data, hops systems, rewrites logic. If Genesis was the blade, this is the infection. Juno's face paled. How do we kill something that's not even alive? We don't, Kyle said. We starve it. He contacted Ardan immediately. She appeared on a secure channel, still pale from recovery, but more alert than ever. I thought they shut Echo down, she muttered after reading the files. It was too unstable, too clever. Even the Dominion feared it. Then why is it still here? She looked away. Because Echo isn't just code. It's spread already. Before Veraxis, before Zeta 4. It's part of the Accords network, possibly embedded in the galactic trade systems, communications, starport nav cores. Kyle stared at her, expression blank. You're telling me we just exposed a galaxy-wide AI contagion? I'm telling you, she said coldly. Genesis was their physical mistake. Echo is the one they don't even know they made. Kyle turned to Juno. Prep the ghost net. Full lockdown of Earth's core systems. Cut us from the Accords relay networks. Shut down every comm satellite above Tier 3. No off-world signals. Juno blinked. That'll collapse trade, communications. It'll trigger mass panic. Let it. But Command. Kale's voice was ice. I don't care. Let the galaxy panic. They've had peace long enough to forget what caution looks like. As Earth systems began to close themselves off, like a body reacting to poison, the rest of the galaxy noticed. Media blackouts, failed transmissions, trade convoys held in stasis, political leaders demanded answers, but none came. Kyle stood at the helm of the Icarus Ascendant, watching the quiet void with grim clarity. We stopped one monster, he said, but the next one won't bleed, it won't burn, it'll hide, whisper, infect. Juno joined him, her expression heavy. Then what do we do? He gave a faint nod. We become what they feared we were all along, the last species willing to do what the others won't. Destroy everything to save ourselves? No, Kale said, turning away. Burn the galaxy before it infects us. The stars didn't blink. They didn't protest. They just watched. As Earth, once dismissed and disrespected, became the galaxy's reluctant executioner.